Good evening. So, if Part 1 established that the federal government claimed ultimate title through Johnson versus McIntosh, the next question becomes what happens to the people living on that land? And this is where it shifts from property law to identity law. This is Part 2 of colonization. Step 1 is political status before citizenship. In Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, Chief Justice John Marshall described tribes as domestic dependent nations. Their relations to the United States resembled that of a ward to its guardian. And that language matters because a guardian controls property and legal standing and decides capacity. That framework justified federal plenary power, meaning Congress could override tribal authority. Now, citizenship becomes the next level. For most of the 1800s, indigenous people were not automatically U.S. citizens. Citizenship was conditional. In Elk versus Wilkins, the Supreme Court ruled that John Elk, who had left his tribe, was not automatically a citizen under the 14th Amendment. The court said he was born under tribal jurisdiction, not U.S. jurisdiction. That decision reinforced something critical. Tribal citizenship and U.S. citizenship were separate political categories. Citizenship wasn't a right, it was something granted, often tied to assimilation. Land fragmentation through the Dawes Act then became a thing. Communal tribal land was divided into individual allotments. If an individual accepted allotment and adopted the U.S. civilized life, they could receive citizenship. So land equaled individualization, which equaled citizenship, which equaled loss of collective sovereignty. Between 1887 and 1934, tribes lost approximately 90 million acres of land. Yeah, that's not rhetoric, that was policy. And then came step 4, census instructions and who counted. And here's where it becomes administrative, because in 1860, census instructions were enumerators. Indians not taxed are not to be enumerated. In other words, not counted. If you maintained tribal status and were not subject to U.S. taxation, you were excluded from the national count. You existed politically, but not statistically. By 1880, enumerators were told Indians living among white population and exercising the right of citizens are to be enumerated. So identity became conditional on integration. And then in 1890, census categories required classification such as full blood, half breed, or quarter blood. Sovereign nations were reduced to fractions. Administrative math replaced political nationhood. And then in 1924, citizenship for all. Finally, the Indian Citizen Act granted citizenship to all indigenous people born in the U.S., but citizenship did not erase federal plenary power. It layered U.S. citizenship over tribal citizenship, a dual status, but unequal authority. So the pattern was connect the dots. In 1823, Discovery Doctrine establishes federal title. In 1831, tribals labeled dependent. In 1884, citizenship denied under the 14th Amendment. In 1887, land broken into allotments. In 1860 to 1890, census classified identity. In 1924, citizenship imposed universally. Structural governance, land control, political control, statistical control, identity control. Structure. So when you hear phrases like domestic dependent nations or plenary power, Indians not taxed, full blood and half breed, understand those weren't casual descriptions, those were legal mechanisms. They determined who could vote, who could own land, who could inherit, who counted in the census, who was visible to the federal government, and who wasn't. Before colonization, identity was tribal. When they ask what your nationality was, it was Shawnee or Pequot or Wampanoag or Choctaw. Citizenship was relational. To your nation, to your clan, to your community. The 19th and 20th centuries replaced that with federal categories, not to preserve sovereignty, but to manage it, not to strengthen nations, but to absorb them. And once you understand that shift from nationhood to administrative classification, you start to see how powerful legal language is, because the battle was never just about land. It was about who had the authority to define reality and where their real continuity lives. I know I'm on here pushing books all the time, but these books really do help you understand way more. And if you want to understand more about this one, check out Erased by Mark Anthony Perkins. I'm going to put the link in the captions, and check it out. It will help you understand a lot more of this. You guys have a great night.